What's going on with you, gang? That's that. That's that splat. That's that splat. Uh, Today we got final affliction. I ain't did one of these in a minute. I'm actually about to start getting back up there to you if we could. Some of these be funny. Some of these be funny. I don't give a damn. Shit, I got a dark sense of humor. A lot of this shit be not a lot, but some of it be funny. And y'all just be making it even more fun. Like y'all be making it even more funnier up in the comments when I'm doing what everybody else is doing. There's other shit that people be reacting to, and y'all don't even be. Y'all be doing the same. Y'all be commenting the same shit up under they shit. Y'all be gargling they meeting eggs, meeting balls. So it's like, but I'll do it. I'm a match your energy in them comments. I'm gonna match your energy. That's just a heads up. Whatever you comment back, I'm gonna match your energy in them comments. Just know that, my boy or shorty. Don't matter. Shit, your grandma could get it.
Fugitives fleeing the law often choose the most perilous hideouts. Their desperation.
I'm already go. Today we got these three criminals were eaten alive by deadly predators while running from police. This they final affliction. We gonna get right up into this. I'm not gonna hold you. So let's get right up into it.
Fugitives fleeing the law often choose the most perilous hideouts. Their desperation to evade capture can drive them into the wild, where they risk encounters with deadly animals. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In today's episode, we go over 3 times criminals were eaten alive by deadly predators while running from authorities. Welcome to Final Affliction.
This is the story of a poacher who perhaps got what he deserved. No information has been released regarding the man's name, so for the purposes of this story, we will refer to him as Malusi. On April 1st, 2019, Malusi and his 3 friends set off on a hunt. They were searching for rhinos in the infamous Kruger National Park. At more than 7,500 square miles in size, Kruger is abundant in wildlife. Just under 1 million people visit the park each year. It is home to thousands of animals, including the Big Five. It is a sanctuary for so many species, but sadly, it is not immune from the pressures of poaching. Stretching more than 220 miles north to south and 40 miles west to east, some poachers slip through the net and go undetected. When this happens, the consequences can be devastating. Some years, anti-poaching patrols pick up literally hundreds of poachers. The battles between rangers and poachers can be bloody and lethal, but despite the dangers, poachers keep coming back for more. This was the path that Malusi had taken. The temptation for a large pay packet had lured him into the life of wildlife crime. Rhino horn is in high demand from the Far East. Despite being made of keratin, the same protein found in our hair and nails, people believe that it has medicinal properties and can cure the likes of cancer. As long as there is demand for rhino horn, there will be poaching, and there doesn't seem to be any let-up in that demand anytime soon. Malusi and his 3 accomplices hiked towards the boundary of Kruger National Park. They had set out at nightfall.
This is for the first final affliction. How many of y'all really be going out there looking for animals and shit? Traveling to go look for animals and shit. Because if you do that, what? You might as well get your motherfucking life insurance and shit in hand for your family. You playing with large ass animals that are either half the size or bigger than your house. And you telling me you going out there with a little ass gun and trying to kill them? You think you gonna make it back home? I don't think so. It's like, I'm not even gonna say a 50-50 chance. It's like a 25-75. 25% chance you might make it back. 75% chance you might end up dying out there. And that's just my thinking on it. Cause I'm a nature motherfucker. I'll do the hikes and shit. You feel me? But I'm not gonna be out where no bears, lions, or coyotes or nothing is like that. You feel me? Nothing that's like gonna really like hunt me. I ain't gonna be nowhere like that. You got me fucked up. So how many of y'all really do that? Cause y'all stupid.
It was a full moon. The silvery light shone on the border fence, and the three men cut away the wire to make a hole just big enough to crawl through. They marked the entry point with a rock and walked into the reserve. It was a still night. The shrill chirping of the crickets in the long grass filled the air. They breathed in the scent of the African wilderness as they stepped through the undergrowth. Their senses were on high alert. They were looking for signs of rhinos. Sometimes they could smell the dung. Sometimes they could hear their low rumbles or the chewing of grass. It wasn't long before Malusi crouched down to the ground. He had come across a large pile of dung. It was definitely that of a rhino, and it was moist, a sign that it was fresh and that the rhino must be nearby. The three of them flicked on the flashlight and pointed it at the ground. They could make out the large, round footprints of a rhino leading away from the pile of dung. They followed the trail, not uttering a word. They knew the drill. They always hunted in a group of 3 or 4, one to shoot the rhino, the other to cut off its horn, and the third and fourth to keep watch. They carried with them 2 .375 hunting rifles and ammunition. They knew they were close now. The excitement of the hunt began to grow, and they scanned the bushes for their quarry. The moonlight played tricks on the mind. Shadows loomed tall and distorted their view. The distant groan of a lion traveled on the gentle breeze, and the acacia trees rattled overhead. Then they heard it and stopped dead in their tracks, the snort of a rhino. It must have been just feet from where the men were standing. They strained their eyes. Just beyond the bushes, they could see the characteristic outline of a white rhino. It was a magnificent animal, standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing upwards of 4,000 pounds, or 1,800 kilograms. It had its head bowed down low as it grazed the grass. They were so close that they could hear the grass being ripped from the ground and the rhino chewing without a care in the world. With such an impressive size, the rhino had an equally impressive...
That rhino was not spooked. He was not worried about y'all. He already knew, or she already knew. They could fuck you up. That's why they wasn't. That's why the rhino wasn't tripping for real. I feel like they did something to provoke that motherfucker.
Of horn, worth more than their weight in gold. The front horns on females can grow to as much as 150 centimeters, or 59 inches long. Malusi raised his rifle. He cocked his head slightly and stared down the scope. It was an easy shot. Once he squeezed the trigger, the men knew that they would have to be quick. The loud crack of the gunshot would echo across the park, and the anti-poaching patrol would be onto them in a matter of minutes. But Malusi never had the chance to pull the trigger. With their sights set firmly on the rhino, none of the men had noticed a large bull elephant in the bushes just yards away to their right. It had sensed the danger they posed, and with a loud trumpet it thundered towards them. Malusi's friends dived out of the way, but with his eyes focused down the gun's sights, Malusi was last to react. The elephant ran into him, and he was sent flying through the air. He hit the ground with...
Did he really just edit a motherfucking skydiving in the air to that shit. Like, what the fuck?
His eyes focused down the gun's sights. Malusi was last to react. The elephant ran into him, and he was sent flying through the air. He hit the ground with a hard smack. The rhino ran away, and Malusi's 3 friends watched in horror as the huge elephant pressed its enormous foot down on top of him. He cried out in pain as his ribcage was crushed under 2 tons of muscle, bone, and ivory. Malusi heard his bones crack and his ribs pop as the pressure built. Then he fell silent. The elephant shook its head and flapped its ears before disappearing into the bush. Malusi didn't move. His friends rushed to his side. His breathing was labored. His breaths were short and shallow. His lungs crackled. He opened his eyes briefly and then closed them again. His 3 friends lifted him between them and rushed him back through the undergrowth, back the way they had come. But in the panic and urgency of the situation, they had lost their way. Instead, they became more and more lost and disoriented until they eventually stumbled onto one of Kruger's tar roads. They knew rangers and anti-poaching units patrolled these roads, and they had no intention of being caught that night. The sun would be rising soon, and so they lay Malusi down beside the road and ran off to find their way out of the park. The moonlight illuminated Malusi's body. His breathing had slowed. Over the chirping crickets, his wheezy breaths and intermittent moans could be heard as he drifted in and out of consciousness. He was a wounded animal, and there were plenty of predators inside Kruger's gates that were opportunistic hunters.
Those is not your friends. They really left you. They just because they didn't want to get caught. Nigga, I'm doing some time for my nigga, especially if he injured, nigga, and we lost. Oh yeah, we gonna have to shoot off them guns, get them anti-poachers here, nigga, and we just got to get him some help, and we gonna have to figure it out. But leaving your homie on the road in the wild like that, bleeding out, some hoe ass niggas. Some hoe ass niggas.
Their eyes glinted in the silvery light. The cackle of a hyena and yip of a jackal sounded nearby. But something else was moving in the undergrowth. Something larger. It moved closer to him. Lying on his back, staring up at the stars, Malusi suddenly felt like he was being watched. He moved his head from side to side to try and see into the darkness. Sweat poured from his brow. Pain surged through him like 1,000 knives. He couldn't move. Then, swiftly, something rushed at him from the tall grass. It was upon him in seconds. He felt the warm, powerful body pounce on top of him, and the sharp canines of a lion closed around his throat. The next day, his friends phoned Malusi's family and delivered the devastating news. Distraught and hoping and praying to bring him home, his family called Regional Ranger Don English. He reassured them that he would do everything he could to locate the young man. A search party was set up. Rangers set out on foot, and the Kruger National Park Air Wing flew over the area in an attempt to locate him. As light faded on the first day of the search, it was called off, only to resume the following morning. 3 days after the elephant attack, field rangers found what appeared to be Malusi's remains. They were found at the Crocodile Bridge section of the park and consisted only of a skull and a pair of trousers. The pride of lions had completely devoured Malusi's body. His skull had been licked clean, and no other evidence of him was found. It was a gruesome discovery, and clearly devastating for his family and friends. The guns were found slung in the bushes nearby along with the ammunition. Police arrested the 3 accomplices, aged between 26 and 35.
And y'all still got arrested either way. And he don't even get a fucking proper burial. Bruh's head was licked clean. Like, them lions was at a buffet. They made sure they got every fucking piece.
They were held in custody and faced charges of possession of firearms and ammunition without a license, conspiracy to poach, and trespassing. In South Africa alone, hundreds of rhinos are poached each year. An exceptional year was 2014, when 1,215 rhinos were poached. Poachers like Malusi could potentially cause the extinction of some of the world's most beautiful animals. It's reasons like this that when people hear about a pride of lions eating someone alive, it's hard to feel bad about an otherwise horrible final affliction. It was the 13th of November, 2015, and Matthew Riggins was up to no good. He had turned to a life of crime to survive on his own in Palm Bay, Florida. And on this particular night, the 22-year-old told his girlfriend that he was heading to Barefoot Bay to burgle some properties there. He anticipated he would be out most of the night, collecting his haul from several of the houses in the area. He would likely be back in the early hours of the following morning. He knew what to do, and he knew what to expect. But this time, things were different. This time, he hadn't anticipated the obstacles that stood in his way. Not just
this time, he about to pass away.
Law enforcement and eagle-eyed locals, but an apex predator out on the hunt in the darkness. He met up with one of his friends, his accomplice, and the two of them headed to Barefoot Bay, a 20-minute drive away. This is a residential community located in Brevard County, Florida. It is situated along the eastern coast of the state. This residential area is a popular destination for retirees. Many Americans and Canadians have holiday homes there, which they visit during the cold winter months that occur further north. The warm tropical climate of Florida offers a relaxing break from these harsh winters. Late that night, Matthew and his friend worked covertly to scout out the best properties to burgle. They dressed in black, kept their voices low, and watched for movement inside the homes within the community. But the two men weren't stealthy enough, and they were spotted by a number of residents. It was late, and their behavior was suspicious as they walked up and down the streets dressed in all black. As they walked up and down Tequesta Drive, sheriffs received emergency calls about the pair. Locals said the men were acting suspiciously and thought they were likely to be burglars. Officers were immediately dispatched to the community, and they turned up at the scene at around 2 a.m. There had been previous burglaries in the area, and they were intent on catching these two suspects. A helicopter was deployed to Barefoot Bay, along with the police canine unit on the ground, to track the men down. Sweeping through the neighborhood, officers spotted the two suspects on Royal Palm Boulevard. Realizing the police were onto them, the two men fled. It was easier if they went their separate ways to avoid capture, and the pair split. Whilst on the run, Matthew found a dark corner and hunkered down. He took out his phone and called his girlfriend. He was sure he was going to get caught. He let her know that he was being chased.
You took your phone with you? First off, they gonna ping your shit. You was already in the area. Boom, they got you. Somewhat. They somewhat got you. But it's like, damn. You gonna do that for real? In that situation, you gonna call, knowing that they gonna be able to tap phones and shit with the cell towers around. You tripping. Motherfuckers be stupid.
That the dogs were onto him and that he may not make it back to her that night. He told her that he would lay low for a little while until the heat of the chase had died down. That was the last time she spoke to Matthew. In an attempt to throw the dogs off his scent, Matthew headed for the water. It was a large lake known to locals as Barefoot Bay Pond, but most bodies of fresh water in Florida are known to be home to alligators. There are said to be 1.3 million alligators in Florida, and they reside in each and every county within the state. Visitors enter the water at their own risk, but in the heat of the chase, it's probably the last thing Matthew would have thought about as he decided to jump into the shallows. He had made a fatal error. As flashlights scanned the nearby streets and alleyways, Matthew scurried down the banks surrounding the pond and waded into the water. He felt the coolness engulf his legs, sending a shiver through his body. He crouched down behind some vegetation. His eyes were wide as he peered through the darkness, back towards the houses. His heart was racing, the adrenaline from the chase coursing through his body. Hiding in the water was his best shot at not getting caught by the police. The sniffer dogs would lose his scent. No one would guess to look for him in the water. But he was in even more danger now than before. A silent predator lay only feet from where Matthew crouched down. He hadn't noticed it in the darkness. Only nostrils and two gleaming eyes would be seen above the waterline, its tail propelling its body under the surface. Matthew was oblivious to the imminent attack. An alligator can detect it.
Yeah, alligators be moving smooth too. Like you really, like you don't hear them, like see them, none of that. So I know for a fact he got crept up on. Oh God, alligator put that thing on him.
Its prey in murky waters or under the cover of darkness. It uses sensitive pressure sensors on its snout to detect vibrations in the water. These touch sensors, which center around their face and jaws, are more sensitive than human fingertips. They allow the animal to hone in on its prey with precision and high accuracy. This particular alligator measured 11 feet, or 3.4 meters long. Within seconds of Matthew entering the water, the alligator moved in for the kill. It grabbed the young man by his legs and pulled him from the shallows. Matthew cried out in pain, at first thinking it was a police dog. He scrambled to try and pull himself out of the water, but the reptile was too strong. Officers on the chase heard his desperate cries, but they couldn't locate them in the darkness, and they didn't know who they belonged to. As Matthew fought to stay above water, he grew weaker. The alligator had closed its jaws around his legs with a bite force of over 2,000 psi. There was no way Matthew was getting out of its vice-like grip, and he was dragged underwater. His lungs were bursting, his body was fading, and less than a few minutes later, he was dead. The alligator pulled Matthew's limp body through the water. Alligators are opportunistic hunters. They typically consume prey that they can eat with one bite. Birds, fish, turtles, and small mammals such as muskrats and kopu are typical prey, but they can also take down deer and occasionally black bears. For larger prey, they usually attack by holding onto the animal and taking it underwater. They will perform a death roll.
Occasionally black bears are fucking huge. And a crocodile can take that motherfucker? Sheesh. Yeah. I do not fuck with water. Ask anybody. I don't fuck with water at all. At all. Besides if I'm getting up in the shower. But besides that, like, large bodies of water, yeah, you will not catch me in that motherfucker.
Tearing off bite-sized chunks. Officers didn't catch either man that night, and when Matthew failed to return home, his family grew worried. They reported him missing later that day. However, it wasn't until 10 days later that Matthew's body was spotted floating in the murky waters of the pond. It had been severely mauled and partially eaten. It was missing its lower extremities and one arm. Next to Matthew's body was an incredibly aggressive alligator. It tried to attack divers when they approached, threatening them with its jaws wide open. It had made its kill, and now it was defending its catch. When officials reported the aggressive alligator, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission were called to the scene. Considering the danger the alligator posed to the public, they had no choice but to euthanize it. They brought in an expert trapper to capture the alligator and to kill it. They knew they had caught the right alligator. When they opened the alligator up, they found human remains consistent with Matthew's injuries, including a single hand and a foot. It is thought that Matthew drowned before being partially eaten by the animal. This is what alligators do with large prey. Matthew's accomplice and friend, who was with him that night, was caught by police and questioned. He refused to cooperate with officers and couldn't provide any further details into Matthew's tragic demise out of fear it would link him to the burglaries. He was released without charge. Over the last 10 years, Florida has averaged 8 unprovoked bites per year that are serious enough to require professional medical treatment. Countless pets have fallen victim to the gators in Florida as well. Some may say that what happened to Matthew was karma for his crimes, while others will say that no one deserves to experience such a terrifying final affliction.
Like that, especially up in water.
How do you take 20,000 children in the middle of New York City without anybody seeing?
The Miccosukee Indian Reservation Resort and Convention Center in Dade County is almost always packed. The high tourist season brings plenty of visitors who come for the airboat tours of the Everglades and the swanky facilities that have great food, spas, and all sorts of entertainments. And in the off-season, the place is booked to the brim with conventions and end-of-year functions. November 2007 was at the time of year when Miami is at its quietest. The summer winds down, and there's just enough heat left to still get a good look at some of the fantastic wildlife in the swamps. This is a time when the tourists are gone, and the Miami natives make use of their beautiful surroundings just before the dry season kicks into full gear. Miccosukee had two functions going on that day. One was an engineering convention, and the other was a farewell for some big-shot Wall Street-type executives. The day was looking like it was going to be a busy one, but not more than usual. The crowd was made up of academics and older business types, all wearing lanyards to get them access to their various seating arrangements and sleeping quarters. This rather boring crowd was exactly what they needed after the chaotic back-to-back events that they had hosted in the past 3 months. The lack of activity might have been a relief for Miccosukee, but not so much for the underbelly of Miami. The two car thieves prowling the parking lot were getting desperate. High season brought plenty of pockets to pick on overcrowded streets, and more than enough cars were accidentally left unlocked by distracted tourists. So Heriberto Rubio and Justo Padron turned to the resorts and hiking trails to fund their criminal careers. Today, they weren't after pocket change. They were looking for cars that still had their keys in the ignition or hidden under seats. If they could get a car out of the lot, they'd have it stripped and the parts sold off before the end of the day. Both men were well into their 30s, and this was how they'd gotten by since their teens. Neither Heriberto nor Justo wanted anything to do with the violent crime sector. At least, this version of criminality was violence-free and low-risk, and the people they targeted were almost certain to have car insurance anyway, so they didn't feel too guilty about the thievery that was about to take place. The two slinked behind bushes all morning, only coming out when the parking lot emptied completely. They found two unlocked...
That's just all assumptions, though. Like, not everybody got insurance, and not just because a motherfucker got a nice car don't mean he got insurance on that bitch. Keep it up, like, I'm keeping it 100 with a nigga. I'm keeping it 100 with y'all. Just because a motherfucker got a nice car, just because a motherfucker got a car, period, don't mean they got insurance for that motherfucker. Don't mean that shit up in their name either. So... motherfuckers be out here struggling too. Motherfuckers be saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get that shit. I'm gonna do that shit next paycheck. I'm gonna do that shit the other paycheck. I'm gonna hold off. I ain't got that. I got it, but I can't do it right now." Type shit. You feel me? So it's like, man, you can't think like that. That's assumptions. Like, nigga, there's motherfuckers that look like they is the slimiest motherfucking gangbanger that got motherfucking four bodies up under his belt. But he got a 9-to-5 and he got a good ass 401k. Don't mean he ain't like that, cause he could get like that. But that nigga got shit to do. That nigga got a life going on like everybody else, nigga. Like, man, there's so many ways out here to get money. And niggas like the Kia boys and shit be taking motherfuckers' cars and all of this other shit. There's so many other ways to get money. Like, nigga, if you gonna go to jail for something that is as cheap as a fucking car, then you might as well just start scamming, my nigga. Come on. What the fuck? Like, be smart about it.
Locked cars and stole a few electronics.
If you're gonna get in trouble, you might as well just go big or go home.
And some money in the glove compartments, but neither of the vehicles had any keys in them. But they weren't deterred. Someone was bound to come along and leave a set behind, so they waited patiently for the right opportunity to arrive. Unbeknownst to them, they'd left the door to one of the cars that they targeted slightly ajar, an expensive sedan that held a laptop and some banknotes that they hid in the bushes where they were hidden. The owner of the vehicle broke away from the engineering convention to retrieve his computer, only to discover the open door and the missing laptop. He alerted the resort manager of the theft, and the staff immediately contacted authorities. While the furious engineer waited in the reception area for police, Heriberto and Justo were already back in the lot. Unaware of the police, Heriberto continued searching unlocked cars and finally found a car with its keys still in the ignition. He called Justo just as he was getting in on the driver's side, and the two police cars pulled in behind them. Justo saw them first, and after yelling a quick warning to his companion, he sprinted into the brush. But Heriberto was stuck. One of the patrol cars was parked right behind him, and two officers descended on the man who had already started the car. In a desperate final attempt to get away, Heriberto reversed, hoping to get out, but he hit the police car behind him, and before he could even think of going forward, he was pulled out of his seat and wrestled to the ground. Meanwhile, the other patrol car saw Justo streaking off into the wilderness, and the two officers jumped out in pursuit. The ground was uneven, and the overgrowth left them plenty of traps to trip over. Justo was as quick and limber as he had been when he was a teenager. He sidestepped and jumped over any obstacles with sure feet and at a breakneck speed. The officers were in great shape, but they were no match for the barefoot thief who moved as fast as lightning ahead of them. Justo cleared the patch of growth in seconds, leaving the policemen blundering around behind him. Ahead of him was a lake that was fed by a small river, and beyond that was the resort fence line. If he could get to the fence, Justo was as good as gone. There was no way they could catch up with him once he was out in the open swamp. Luckily, Justo was as good a swimmer as he was at running. Without breaking his speed, he dove into the murky water gracefully. The staff and resort goers had spilled out onto the lawn to catch a glimpse of the spectacle playing out on the grounds. One man was being handcuffed and stuffed into a dented patrol car, and the other was leading a spectacular chase that ended with a splash. The two officers in pursuit were already winded, and Justo was clearly going to win this race. But the staff of Mikasuki were horrified at the sight of the agile man streaking past them. They knew better than anyone how dangerous that water was. The resort was home to a very large alligator, which the employees playfully named Pancho. Pancho basked in the sun on the bank.
They named that nigga? Oh, man. Hell nah. They named that nigga Pancho. Ain't nothing Pancho about that nigga. That is a big ass fucking dinosaur. Old ass dinosaur.
That water was. The resort was home to a very large alligator, which the employees playfully named Pancho. Pancho basked in the sun on the banks almost every morning, and he never paid any mind to the people. The lake was covered in signs warning everyone not to swim there due to the alligator presence. But obviously, Justo hadn't noticed any of these signs with all of his attention on his flight from the cops. The waitresses and groundskeepers yelled at him in a mix of Spanish and English, screaming that there was a gator on the other side of the lake. Pancho woke up from his slumber in the sun. All of the commotion was not at all what he had in mind this afternoon. The predator scanned the crowd and then the lake. To its surprise, there was a human swimming past him. This was unprecedented. Never before had humans ever come even close to its domain, and certainly not alone in the water. Pancho didn't need telling twice. The person swimming past him was a meal, practically gift wrap for him to take. Pancho slipped into the cool, dark lake, propelling itself with its tail so fast that not even Justo could outswim it, no matter how good of a swimmer he was. The crowd was hysterical, and some of the braver men even went to the very edge of the pond to get Justo's attention. The two police officers came to a halt where Justo had dived in. Even they started yelling for the man to get out, but Justo was deaf to their screams. The only sound in his ears was the rushing water and his heartbeat beating in his skull. And every time his head came up for air, he only had eyes for the fence line that promised freedom. He was halfway across the lake now, pumping his arms like he'd never done before. Justo was oblivious to the danger closing in on him, and the crowd stood horrified, watching the reptilian hunter sink into the water, swim toward the man, and finally, they saw the beast reach the thief and pull him smoothly and soundlessly under the water. Taken completely by surprise, Justo felt the heavy, scaled body close over his back, twisting around him as it wound Justo into its coils. The horrifying realization of what was happening hit Justo just as the gator started spinning him in its drowning death roll. But it was too late now. He was securely trapped, and his head was turned upside down while water flooded into his mouth. Justo grabbed desperately at the hard scales, trying with all of his might to pull and push the animal off him. But his efforts were useless. It was like clawing at rocks, and Pancho didn't slow down its spinning or react in any way to the man's struggles. Round and round he was thrown, screaming soundless bubbles as the animal pulled him deeper and deeper into the dark. The gator didn't waste time spinning his prey on the surface of the water like they normally do. With all the screaming and yelling from the shore, it dove deep under the water to finish the kill without any humans interfering from the surface. As it turned in circles, it squeezed its body tighter around the man. Justo felt his ribs shatter into his already waterlogged lungs. The lake water he'd inhaled was now joined with blood. The immense pressure and the unbearable pain started to fade away as he lost consciousness. He was already passed out when the creature latched onto him, landed at the bottom of the lake. It kept lying there, 50 feet below the surface, until it felt Justo's heartbeat stop. Only when it was absolutely sure that the man was dead did it release its hold. The alligator quickly repositioned its grip on Justo and swam him to a more secure location where it could feed in peace. On the lake's banks, more help had already been called, and Heriberto was driven away in handcuffs. From the back of the patrol car, he'd heard the commotion, and he was able to put together the pieces about what was happening. He was horrified and helpless to do anything about Justo's predicament, and Heriberto knew he was never going to see the man he'd known since they were teenagers. Diving teams and more police cars arrived as Heriberto was driven out of the parking lot to the nearest jail. The ride was almost completely silent, broken only by the officers giving him their condolences. Even they found the entire affair hard to absorb. Later that night, the same two officers visited Heriberto in his cell to inform him that his friend's remains had been found, that the alligator responsible for his death had been killed, and that any remains still left in its stomach had been recovered and placed with its owner. Unfortunately, Heriberto wasn't able to attend the funeral alongside his friend's family. He had no one to bail him out while he awaited his court date. So Heriberto was forced to sit on his cot on the day he knew Justo was being put into the ground, left with only his thoughts and regrets. The Miccosukee Indian Reservation never allowed another predator to make its home on the property again. If an alligator was spotted for more than 2 days in a row, they'd chase it back into the swamp where it belonged. Pancho was the last gator they ever tolerated after that day, fearing someone else would meet the same terrifying final affliction.
That's crazy. He ain't even get to go to his homie's funeral or nothing. Like, that's so sickening. I feel bad for that nigga. Oh God. But if you made it this far, like, comment, share, and hit that sub button for your boy. Shit, man, we faded early. I think I'm fucking gone.